Back in action after this weekend down in New Orleans that I talked about a little bit last week. And honestly, I don't know how Zyron Forstall is leaving, because I certainly didn't want to leave after a couple of days back home in the city. But almost football season time, and even in just a few days away, certainly a lot to unpack. This is Louisiana Versailles Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Rose, and we're going to talk a lot about Louisiana's 2027 class now, and what it means for the class in state with Zyron Forstall, heading to Florida to go to IMG Academy next, as well as the opportunity for LSU with some great talent in the state. Sam has some updates as well from some of these top prospects still in the state. We'll talk about those guys, a couple of fresh commitments to other Louisiana FBS programs, and, hit on a variety of topics, obviously, including, we'll get shortly to Peyton Houston, who we kind of teased a little bit last week. We'd have some to talk about with him as a member of that 2027 class. But Sam, you did not get a chance to come to New Orleans, so I apologize for referencing that again. I'm sure there's a lot of FOMO going, and I didn't help it with a couple of pictures of, some Midway pizza and wherever the hell else I tweeted you pictures from. But how was your week, and how are you doing?
Not as good as yours. My wife and I, you know her as Allison, but I'm sure our listeners don't know her. We are in this thing. This is I'm learning so many new terms with like pregnancy. It's called nesting.
This is also going to get gradually confusing for our 7 recurring fans, viewers, friends, whatever, who don't realize that both of our significant others are Allisons, just spelled differently. And so over time, they'll just casually realize one of us mentioned Allison, and then, wait, didn't the other one mention Allison last time? And so just to clear any confusion up with that, if you hear Allison references, that just is kind of a catch-all to both women in our lives.
We did that obviously intentionally. But yeah, so we're doing this thing called nesting, which is basically what I do all year round, which is, sit in a corner and work and do things out of your house. But this is what Allison is joining me in her 9th month of pregnancy. So things are not super interesting here. So I've had plenty of time to dive into this 2027 Louisiana class, see where everyone is leaning. I've dove into the state of Texas. I've dabbled a little bit in Oklahoma. You know what, nesting, it's not for everyone, but with the exception of going to games and various events in the off season, it's kind of just what I do in general. I just nest. So I am Sam, the giant big bird, in his 9th month of pregnancy with my Allison. So yes, I missed Rum House. I wish I could leave the house. Unfortunately, I am tied down. I am not allowed to go anywhere. And that won't change, I think, for another 3 or so weeks. We'll see.
And to viewers of the Louisiana Versailles channel, obviously, now is a great time to tell you to be on the lookout for Sam's new solo podcast, What to Expect When You're Expecting with Sam Spiegelman. He'll be launching that. He'll be launching that on Thursdays.
From the hospital. From the hospital.
Yeah, we'll just whenever baby Peyton Pop Spiegelman greets us all in a few weeks. Did I just spoil the name to everyone?
A little bit.
Sorry,
a little bit. I hope Sean isn't listening.
Then whatever day of the week that is, we'll start the recurring What to Expect with the Spiegelman's pod here on the Louisiana Versailles channel. But go ahead.
Very quick aside. There was some conversations in our house this week. My older sister called and, ridiculed me a little bit about the nesting and, what my role is in the hospital. To then my Allison goes of course you have a big role. It's you're the master of distraction, which to me is a negative compliment, right? It's I try to stay focused all day long. It's I happen to get distracted, but I'm trying to stay focused. But I did think that our podcast listeners might enjoy that just, I do find just a lot of things to bring to the forefront as far as outside distractions when we're at games, when we're en route to games, when we're trying to figure out where to eat after games. So, maybe our listeners can empathize with me for the next couple of weeks as we dive into the green zone.
And while we wait on all of these updates, the distractions and the new baby that, I joked with Sam off air last week about the Peyton Spiegelman name potentially, because as they look out, as the Spiegelmans look out for daycares and whatnot, apparently Arch is a really poppin' name with this next generation of young Texans and, young sons of football fans and whatnot. So, maybe we get some Peyton Pop Spiegelmans and Peyton Pop, insert last name here of the world here sooner than later. But until we get to that point, until we get to that next generation, let's talk about this 2027 group. A lot of these guys we have talked about at different points before. For instance, when LSU offers players like Braylon Calais, or when some of these guys have had standout performances. We've talked a bunch about that 27 quarterback class with Pop and Elijah Haven and Malachi Ziegler and company. Last week, we talked about Zion Forstall, the number 1 rated prospect in the state in Louisiana, top 5 prospect nationally, heading out to IMG before his junior year, and kind of, what that meant for LSU's recruitment of him, and just looking forward to, his development over the next few years. There's still an awful lot of talent that will be playing on Friday nights in Louisiana this fall. And we mentioned a couple of them there, but you had a chance also to do kind of a look at that class in state, the opportunity that's there for LSU. I think we're in the midst of a wave of talent with a couple of these classes back to back that it feels like foundation potential for a national championship run for LSU if they continue to hit the way they are in 2026. And so just as you looked, on Rivals over the past week at that 2027 group in state, what has kind of stood out to you in the early makings of, the Louisianimals coming through?
Yeah, well, you know what? It was sparked by, after Lamar Brown committed, we had said, I think 6 of the top 7 players or 7 of the top 8 players in Louisiana now committed to LSU in that 2026 class. And big picture, I believe it's 8 of the top 10 in the state after the updated Rivals 300 rankings. 2026 is a absolutely loaded class in the state of Louisiana. And then you look into 2027 and it may not be as top heavy, at least right now, but certainly has the potential to be just as good, maybe even more talented, dare I say, to be determined. But the old saying is that LSU wins a lot of national championships when, 1, the state is loaded, and 2, they keep a lot of those players in the state. Obviously, that has been a goal of every single head coach at LSU, from Les Miles to Ed Orgeron and now BK. They've put a fence around the state. I think they're in a great. They've obviously have the makings of getting almost every single player that they want in 2026 from Louisiana, with one more big fish to go for the next few months. And now they're laying the groundwork for 2027. And of course, with that deep of a class, they've put a ton of early offers on the table. They've been able to work out and host a lot of these prospects multiple times at this stage, and they're going to be in a really good spot to clean up again in the state of Louisiana. You mentioned some of the more nationally recognizable prospects in the state, guys like Zion Forstall out of formerly Jesuit, Ahmad Hudson, 5-star tight end out of Ruston, multi-sport LSU legacy target, Albert Simeon, I believe is the nation's number 1 or 2 interior offensive lineman in the country out of Lake Charles. Easton Royal is one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in the country. The list goes on and on. And then by the industry ranking, Elijah Haven is the number 1 quarterback in the industry ranking, obviously taking into account not just Rivals, but 24/7 and ESPN as well. LSU is in a really great spot at multiple positions with a lot of these kids. You've referenced this on the show before. They're not going to be able to take everyone. A lot of these kids play the same position. And when you're LSU and you're having a good season, you're able to also recruit outside of Louisiana on certain recruitments. Not everyone, but they've obviously been able to go into places like Pensacola and East Texas and Houston and Dallas and Mississippi and win some of those tough recruitments. So when you factor in this baseline of in-state guys that they're in a great spot with, a favorable spot in, and then factor in the blue chippers around the country, you got to be excited that they're very much in line to get another top 10 haul for 2026 with still room to go. They're going to keep recruiting Blaine Bradford. They're going to keep pushing for a quarterback if they can find one. And they're in a similar boat for 2027 where they're going to have their opportunity to sign almost as many guys as they really choose out of the state, because a lot of those guys want to be at LSU. Their LSU is either leading or in that lead group of schools at this point. And in my experience, I'm not going to speak for you, but I think you would agree. When you're already in a good spot, as when LSU starts to dial up the heat for a player that wants to be in Baton Rouge at the right time, it usually ends well for this staff. And I think Lamar Brown is a perfect example of that, where when LSU proved to be the team that he wanted to be, as soon as he realized that, they were able to kind of hit those benchmarks and make that recruitment come to fruition. And I think that they're going to be in a similar spot with a lot of these 2027s. And I know you're going to take the wheel at this point. It is a super exciting class in the state for 2027.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, you're not going to win all of them, no matter who the LSU head coach or staff is. And most guys, it does seem like, grow up and want to, if given the opportunity, wear purple and gold. And there are going to be exceptions. Every kid's different. Every circumstance is different. Every family is different. In some cases, it's best for a young man to get away and go see something different and be a part of a different place for a few years. But those are exceptions to a pretty strong rule of guys that grow up in Louisiana and want to play for the Power Four program that they grow up watching in the state. That's something we referenced last week with Lamar. Keelan Moses and I talked about it after Lamar's announcement, of essentially a conversation they had where Keelan told him, look, it really is just different being a Louisiana guy and getting the opportunity to play here. This is what we all grew up. It's not the same as being in a Texas where there are several Power Four programs, in Mississippi where there's multiple, Alabama where there's multiple, and on down the line. And so when you have that strength of talent coming through, like these 26 and 27 classes back to back, it is extremely exciting. As fans, don't expect to get every single kid, but when you can hit on 8 or 9 of the top 10, or 12 or 13 of the top 15 in the state in good classes, that is an incredible foundation for your program in a talent-rich state like Louisiana. One, just kind of transitioning into some more individuals in this class. One guy that we mentioned last week, as we kind of wrapped up with a lot of the Lamar Brown talk that we wanted to talk about at some point. One guy that may be heading elsewhere, still a long way to go, but you have an early forecast in for Peyton Houston to USC. His buddy, Ethan Booby Feaster from, the northwest area of the state, but plays his high school ball out at DeSoto, Texas. He just committed on July 4th to the Trojans out there at USC. And you and I had kind of talked a little bit again behind the scenes about, there had been a lot of talk of the potential of those two guys playing together at the next level. And now the USC Trojans have another nice recruiter to their arsenal to try and chase Peyton Houston in a guy, Booby Feaster, that he's known since he was a kid. What made you feel confident early on to, at least for now, going into the junior year for Pop, put in that early forecast?
Listen, when you have Booby recruiting you, it's hard to say no, Jared, and you know that better than anyone. Listen, and if you're an LSU fan, earmuffs for just a second, because Pop Houston was visiting LSU multiple times this spring, along with his good buddy Booby Feaster, and at one point LSU was the leader for Booby Feaster this offseason. Yes, the two have grown up together. Their families are extraordinarily close. And those are both big factors in why there's an early prediction in for USC with Pop Houston. But, Pop has seen a big shift in his recruitment over the last few months, especially as the calendar flipped to June. I would say LSU and Georgia and Texas and A&M and Oklahoma and Georgia were at the forefront with Pop this spring, as he made a series of visits around the country. And then after June 15th, Pop had made a couple of camp outings at Clemson, at USC, at Notre Dame, I believe. And then the coaches could directly contact him and his family to start showing, hey, you are the top priority to us in this class. And I don't think any team did that better than USC. USC was the first, Pop Houston was the first 2027 quarterback in the country to receive an offer from Luke Heward and Lincoln Riley. That happened, I believe, the week of Pop's spring game at Evangel. And then Coach Heward was on the sidelines for that game at the end of May. Pop was able to get to USC for a private workout with Lincoln Riley a couple of weeks later. And as anyone would expect, if you've seen Pop sling the rock, that workout went extremely well. Lincoln Riley is very much in the Pop Houston fan club. I'll put it that way. And I think we've gone from LSU and Oklahoma and Texas and Georgia being on top to schools like USC and Clemson and Notre Dame and Oklahoma and Texas to a degree pushing behind the scenes. I think in this recruitment, it was important for Pop to feel like he was the top priority. When you look at it from a simple standpoint of much like when Arch and Ricky and Eli were coming out of that 2022, 23 class,
Mm-hmm.
It was similar with Eli Holstein and Ricky Collins. The same schools are recruiting all three quarterbacks. They're all super talented. And the same applies to Elijah Haven and Pop Houston and Malachi Ziegler. There's a lot of overlapping programs recruiting all three of these young men. Well, USC is not recruiting Elijah Haven. They're not recruiting Malachi Ziegler. They are actually not recruiting any other quarterbacks in the country, not named Pop Houston. And they have been very transparent in this process. I think Lincoln Riley's background as an offensive play caller, the fact that they landed Booby Feaster as a part of, if not number one, number 2 or 3 recruiting class in the country this year, USC looks like they're about to be a contender in the Big Ten for the foreseeable future. And they have made Pop feel like a huge part of what's to come. With that, I felt pretty comfortable. We know that Pop is going to make a decision before the end of his junior season. So of the 3 quarterbacks in the state, I would expect Pop to be off the board first. With that being said, I like where USC is positioned. Things could very much change. This is recruiting in 2025, so I would be naive to say this recruitment is over. But I like where USC stands, and I think they have a very compelling case with this very talented blue chip passer from the boot.
I for sure expected a Pop move. I mean, pun obviously intent for Pop to pop at some point during his junior school year. I know he and his family want to get to some of these game day visits this fall and get a better sense for the program, on a game weekend in the fall and see how the season's going and all of those things. But from there, I think that he wants to kind of have a decision so he can go be a face of a class and be helping recruit guys to join him wherever he's heading over the course of next summer. It sounds like you expect, when you said a decision his junior season, you expect it like this calendar year, like before we even get to the holidays, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He says quietly without adding more. So you can go ahead and bank on that with the coy response there from Sam. You mentioned already, and it was exactly, another piece I wanted to hit on, the prioritization and knowing that he is their guy is something that I think clearly carries a lot of weight with Pop and with his family, and rightfully so. And so everything that you just said, all those factors about USC really making him that much of a priority in their class in 2027 is certainly going to speak volumes to them during their recruiting process. Also notably, I mean, for Pop and other guys, Eric Henderson, Trevon Reed, and those guys at USC are, for LSU fans, frustratingly names that you're probably going to hear more and more about on the recruiting trail in Louisiana. They've obviously had some success in recent classes with Jakeem Stewart moving up to that 25 class, Roderick Tesano Jr., who's a commitment in this 26 class. But the Trojans are in on a lot of guys in this upcoming 27 class. Sam has the early forecast in for Peyton Houston to potentially be a part of that class. He had a story the other day with Javon Vital from Hamilton Christian. That's a program that has been heavily in play with him. There's an offer out to Braylon Calais, and the list kind of goes on. USC, as well as anyone, as well as LSU, has recognized, hey, there's some great talent coming through the boot right now, and let's go see, how much we can dip in there and bring some of those guys west. And as they've built some early momentum with Ja and with Booby, who knows a lot of these Louisiana guys, it's only going to become that much more intriguing of a landing spot for some of these guys to venture west. Tell me some more about, your story on Vital, as well as just what you're seeing from the Trojans identifying and making their moves on some select talent out here.
Yeah, this isn't like the famous LSU versus Alabama battles where the top guys in the state are between LSU and Alabama, like Dylan Moses or Kelvin Joseph, or Cam Robinson or anything. But they're, with the 2026, the 2027 classes, we're talking about particularly deep groups of talent inside the state. And in particular, you can look at a group like the D linemen or the receivers in the state for 2026, or the receivers and quarterbacks in the 2027 classes. And there's no way that LSU can sign 3 quarterbacks from the state next year. It's just impossible. Let's put it that way. That is something I would go on the record of saying that is impossible. USC is one of these teams, and you mentioned Coach Henney, Coach Reed, Lincoln Riley has come. I mean, they have dipped into Shreveport historically over the years. That is trying to make their presence felt. It's been a rotating door of programs that have come into the boot over the last 10 or so years, making their mark. You can remember back in the day with Kansas, with Puka and Jamar Chase and Aaron Brule. And while they only walked away with Puka, they made a pretty sizable dent in the Louisiana recruiting territories. And that's been a theme that a lot of different schools, I think at this point, you could say that maybe A&M and Texas are giving LSU the biggest run for especially those top guys. But they're trusting their evals as well into that second and third and fourth tier. And I think USC is really trying to amp that up, especially under this particular coaching staff. Like I said, Lincoln Riley is familiar recruiting Louisiana from his days at Oklahoma, and they've dipped into the booth several times since. And when you added Eric Henderson, who is in his first college job, I mean, he's in year 2 or 3 at this point, but he's going to go to his roots. He's going to go to New Orleans and Louisiana. Trovon Reed has been recruiting Louisiana at some of these at various stops that have given LSU fans headaches. And now you put him with the USC logo behind him. He's not only one of the best evaluators in the country, he's a fantastic recruiter. So when you pair the USC brand with those sort of coaches, and if they can right the ship and make some noise in the Big Ten this year, they're going to become an even bigger force for not only guys like Pop, but people are going to want to play with Pop Houston. They're going to want to play with Jakeem Stewart. They're going to want to play with Rod Tizzino. So it becomes that much more attractive when more people from your state are going out there. And I think we'll really tell with this 2026 and then 2027 class whether they can maintain that stranglehold on Louisiana, like Texas has been able to under Steve Sarkisian, and like Texas A&M has under parts of Jimbo Fisher, but largely Mike Elko.
Getting talented guys, as well as you mentioned, guys are going to want to play with these. I mean, Ja has been someone that his peers have gravitated toward. We've seen that from the time he was in middle school getting ready for high school, that folks gravitate toward him. We've seen it with Pop throughout his high school career. I mean, up close and personal for me on the 7-on-7 circuit, guys want to go play with Pop Houston. Obviously he transfers to Evangel during his freshman year. He transfers, and then you see others follow, and suddenly as Coach Duran mentioned, guys are just showing back up at the E now. They want to be a part of this Pop Houston experience and know the talent that he brings and how special he is and how special he can make others around him be in terms of reaching their full potential. And so if he ends up out there in a year and a half and becomes, another big pull and another big recruiter for the Trojans, that will be interesting to watch. I think for LSU fans right now, you're just watching how this fall plays out and hope USC doesn't have a great season because that will be a pretty big barometer, probably both for Pop in his recruitment itself, but as well as for other folks starting to watch and see how seriously do they need to take the Trojans. You had an article up this past week as well on Ahmad Hudson, one of the other top prospects in this 27 class we've had a chance to talk about, have had a chance to watch these last couple of years continue to grow and develop as a tight end for those Ruston Bearcats and as a multi-sport star for Ruston and on the recruiting trail. He just picked up several new basketball offers to go with that great set of football offers. What's the latest from you on Rivals about Ahmad and just kind of where he is now as he prepares for his junior year at Ruston?
Yeah, I don't think he's anywhere close to the finish line. From an LSU standpoint, you have to feel very good about where LSU is positioned. He was back in Baton Rouge for a second consecutive summer working out for that staff. We know we were on hand for Friday Night Lights last year when he really blew the doors out of that workout as a sophomore.
You didn't get a chance to come to that event this year. It was one of the best camp performances I've seen someone have through the years at LSU. Was Ahmad on Friday Night Lights heading into junior year. It was just unreal.
He is, he's just really scratching the surface. Again, this happens, and we talk about it in the podcast a lot. But this, when you see a glimpse, when you see a glimpse of a youngster making plays, and then you're kind of like zeroed in for the next couple of years. But first of all, we saw him as a freshman when he played against Jesuit. We obviously saw him in the state championship game the past 2 years, and not too much production so far from this incredibly gifted athlete that we know is just scratching the surface. But you have seen it in the camp setting last summer, and like you're saying this summer with, two of the better camp setting, performances. He has range as a receiver. He has incredible, obviously, physical gifts, being at 6'5" and a massive catch radius, 6'6" rather. But he's not a big, bulky tight end. He's long, he's lean, he's gifted, just as he is on the basketball court. It's really exciting to think about what his potential would be in the LSU offense. He said he's been watching a lot of spring and summer practices, and he loves how LSU is using the tight end. But he's been to Nebraska twice. I don't need to do any Mickey Joseph references, but the Nebraska has plenty to play with from an NIL perspective, and the fact that they have one of the best 2027 quarterbacks, Trey Taylor, committed, doing some active recruiting for the Huskers, does not hurt. I know that his visit to Florida this spring really was an eye opener for him. I expect Florida to continue as they have with this 2027 group to push those Louisiana ties and keep recruiting Ahmad. And then, bear me to repeat, A&M worked out Ahmad Hudson this summer. They obviously have loved him. He's been to game days in College Station. Would expect him to be back at A&M this fall. I think LSU will be hard to beat in the end, but this race is really starting to pick up its pace, and I think everyone kind of realizes that Ahmad has tight end one potential in this class, a lot like Trades did with Zachary and Eastvale back in the day. With as that multi-sport background, just scratching the surface of potential. And if you get him in the right fit, I think that's ultimately what's going to be the biggest catalyst here. But you have to like where you are if you're LSU and the way you've recruited this legacy prospect since the beginning.
Ahmad with his development, the strides that he showed from freshman year to that summer we saw him last summer he had a huge jump in production from freshman to sophomore season. And so if he continues to build the way he is building, to having the impressive performance this summer, if we see those next steps this fall, and you want to see him continue, if he's going to play tight end at the next level, continue to fill out, get stronger, be more physical in his play, and just the way that he's approaching the game out there. If we see a similar step going into junior year as what we saw last year, freshman to sophomore, then it should be a really exciting fall for Ahmad and for the Bearcats and for anyone that gets a chance to put eyes on him this fall, because he has grown tremendously over the last year and a half. And so if we're watching a next step, it's going to be an awful lot of fun. You mentioned LSU as kind of a team that may be tough to beat for Ahmad. Is there a guy, or are there a couple of guys in this 27 group in state that you feel the most confidently in? I don't need you to put percentages on it or anything, but if you were having to bet early on this is a guy, or these are a couple of guys that you're most confident stay in state and wear purple and gold at the next level, who kind of jumps out to you that LSU fans should, again, not feel safe, but feel maybe most confident in it?
Yeah, I would say that LSU, they may not be the public leader for Ahmad, but I think that they are sitting in that lead spot as of today. And how about his teammate, Jaden Anding? I got a funny feeling that LSU might be the team to beat with Aiden's little brother, who just picked up his offer from this staff after another great camp performance after a breakout sophomore season for Ruston. I got a strong feeling that the Anding brothers won't be playing too far away from each other. I know a guy that you're very close with. The top running back offer in the class for LSU is Jaden Miles out of Baton Rouge Catholic. I have a hard time not seeing Jaden being at least one of the running backs in LSU's 2027 class from right there in Catholic. Auburn and A&M are swinging away in that one, but it seems like that LSU offer has been the one that he's continued to gravitate toward, and no one has hosted Jaden more than the Tigers already. We talk about this loaded wide receiver core, but right at the top, Easton Royal, I think, is going to be really hard for LSU to lose in that one. There's a lot of really great receivers in this class. We mentioned Javon Vital. We talk about Miguel Whitley and Raekwon Williams from AUG. But Easton, coming off the Bayou Splash visit, has talked about Florida and LSU and Texas being among the teams in pursuit. But ever since that Bayou Splash visit, putting that early offer on the table before that visit, the way that LSU has played this hand, I really like where they're standing with Easton at this point. I think even though Florida is making a really big run at Elijah Haven, I think that his relationship with Joe Sloan is second to none. So I think if LSU really makes a concerted effort to bring in Haven as their QB for the class, I think it'll be hard for Elijah to say no. I think that's I think LSU is in a good spot with Albert Simeon, but I don't think it's safe to say that anyone is leading at that point. He is still doing his collective homework on these programs. Karan Eugene is someone who has a lot of LSU interest. USC and A&M, pinch me if you've heard that before, are both coming full throttle for Karan, who has obviously made plenty of money with his final play of the state championship game. But he's someone that LSU and Corey Raymond have quickly taken a liking to after seeing him this summer. But yeah, those are the guys I think LSU is sitting pretty well with.
Yeah, I think. And if we're still including Zion, what is the number in state now? 13 offers out for the 27 class for LSU, I believe, 13 or 14. And all the kids that have offers are exceptional young talents. And so rightfully so that LSU has made the early move on them. But I also really like where LSU is positioned with the vast majority of them. And again, it's a long way to go. Most of these decisions won't be made in the coming months. No ink will hit paper for another year and a half. But to be in the position that LSU is early, to Sam's point earlier, it is a great place to be for the in-state program to have that foundation there on top of, obviously, in many cases, childhoods growing up and idolizing the Tigers on Saturday. Hitting on a couple of these other programs, Braden Allen, we talked about him last week, man. Committing to Tulane, we kind of forecasted that's where it looked like he was going to be announcing. He ultimately did last Wednesday evening announce his commitment to the Green Wave. Tremendous addition to that Green Wave 2026 class. Another fantastic in-state wide receiver along with Trez Davis from West Monroe now on board to head uptown. And then Coach Summerall's got to be looking at Twitter a day or two later and thinking, come on, guys, as Ole Miss, his former employer just a few years back when he was, recruiting this area for the Rebels, Ole Miss makes its move on Braden Allen. We've already talked a lot about what he brings to the table, obviously, for this Tulane class. Do you have any immediate early read on now Ole Miss trying to get involved and throw an SEC curveball into the recruitment of Braden Allen?
Yeah, he was back and forth between Texas Tech and Tulane for a pretty sizable amount of time before he started to lean toward Tulane, and then really had to endure a late run from this Texas Tech staff, who was going after a local prospect of their own, but had no inclination whether he was coming or not. So they were coming for Braden Allen, taking him, and no matter what the situation was. So he had options outside of Tulane. So that's a huge recruiting win for Coach Sum and that Tulane staff, Coach Sheridan and whatnot. I think the Ole Miss offer will, catch his eye. I think it already has. But I don't think it's one of those things where he is going to, back off his commitment to Tulane at this point. They put a lot of thought and consideration into the Green Wave before that selection. Now, does that mean that he might take a visit to Oxford in the season? I think that's certainly on the table. And I think if you're Tulane, you tell Braden, go take your visit to Oxford and make sure that the opportunities that are available to you in the Grove are just as good as the opportunities available to you uptown. But I know that they pushed a narrative about getting groomed and developed by Coach Sheridan, and he has, of course, Power 4 SEC ability. Whether he wants to follow suit to Ole Miss. We'll I think it's a long way to think that that's a possibility, but I think we'll know more a little bit this fall, depending on where he visits and if he does make it out there or back to Lubbock potentially.
The same way LSU fans are watching USC and hoping they don't have too great of a season, some Tulane fans now are watching Ole Miss and saying, man, if Sage Ryan could have not that enjoyable of an experience in Oxford, that would be great. If Sage could report back to Braden, this wasn't that great. Just stay in state, man. Go to Tulane. But we'll see how it all goes. Just thought that was an interesting timing for Ole Miss to come into play immediately after the commitment announcement. But sometimes that's how recruiting works. Obviously, there will be no signatures until December, and so every commitment that we're watching is to some degree or another going to remain a battle to make sure that you're continuing to take care of your business on the field and with your relationships, because if you're recruiting the type of players like all these guys that we're talking about that are going to be desirable prospects to have in your class, that means you're not the only one that is going to want them in your class, and you're going to have some battles on your hands. Couple of other commitment notes. Harrison Kader, the outside linebacker, strong safety / baseball standout for Catholic Baton Rouge, committed to the Raging Cajuns. They've done a nice job of pulling some notable Catholic high standouts across the basin to go play their college ball out there in Lafayette. Also, shout out to ULM landing Van Martinez, the tackle from Neville, kind of trying to follow in the footsteps of the Will Campbells and Lance Hurds and companies. Just, watching some of Van's film, he's got some of that same edge to his game. He's played both left and right tackle for the Tigers. And as much as, again, we give ULM hell at times for not recruiting the state a little bit more, nice to see them add a local kid right there from a tremendous program up there at Neville, and a program that has had a strong track record of producing fantastic offensive linemen. And so Van's going to be staying home in Monroe playing for the Warhawks as Coach Vincent and company continue to turn that program around. And just kind of closing it out, we wanted to mention a young man that was a member of this 25 class that we had such an enjoyable time watching play these last couple of years, to get a chance to know these last couple of years. I hate when we have to have episodes that have sad moments, and I hate the fact that it's now becoming a recurring theme this calendar year in particular, where we're losing young men that we've had a chance to get to know, and we're losing them far too soon. And just wanted to send our heart out again, as we both did on social media on Sunday morning, to Corey Adams' family and teammates and friends and everyone that he's touched. Everyone that he had the opportunity to touch through his far too short life. We lost him to gun violence over the weekend up there in the Memphis area, and it hurts so much to know that we're not going to have the opportunity to see him play for Ole Miss in these coming years. The light that he brought as a young man and the talent that he brought to the football field as a young football player, was really looking forward to his future in a lot of ways. And to have it be extinguished by the senseless gun violence that continues to be an issue, certainly we know in New Orleans, but obviously, up there in Memphis, where this incident happened, and really on a national scale, is extremely frustrating, and just feels like something that we deal with way too much. But mostly just want to take a second to remember Corey, and again, send some love to everyone that is close to him.
Yeah, and I won't speak too much because it's more about I don't have too much to add, but Bryce Brown, a longtime head coach and member of the Carr football program and leader of the community. If you've ever spoken to Bryce or if you know a lot about his motivations as the head coach of Carr, yes, it is to produce D1 talent. And yes, it is to play in the Superdome and come bring trophies back, each and every December. But the reason that Bryce is far and away the best coach in Carr history and one of the most valued members of that community is that he has a bigger purpose, and it is to try to, help kids escape the community that they're from. And it starts with the football field, before school, after school, long practices, time in the weight room, but really time out of the community. So you're focusing on yourself and preparing for the future, as opposed to getting yourself into trouble with some of the people that aren't. And Corey was one of, I would say Bryce's A+ students, is that Corey never got into trouble. He was such a joyous, bright, incredibly talented young man. Just I had such a great time covering Corey from his sophomore through senior years. After the state championship win in December, you just knew that for those seniors, it meant so much. And Corey had a very eventful recruitment. He was pursued by many different schools and ultimately ended up with Coach Pete over at Ole Miss. And I think that our colleague Josh said it a couple of weeks ago, and the timing couldn't have hurt even more, but how excited he was to see what Corey was going to do as a freshman over in Oxford. So the irony that, the gun violence that his coach was hoping that he would escape playing in Oxford would eventually be the bugaboo that unfortunately took this young man's life, like you said, way too early. It's deafening how much that sucks. But given that that's how it happened, all we can do is look back and wish, like you said, wish the best for Corey's family, his friends, the Carr football community, the Algiers community, and just hope that whoever is listening out there, that this 17-year-old's incredibly bright future was just taken away with a couple of gunshots over a godforsaken stupid reason. I don't know what it was, but I know it was stupid. And now that we can't be looking forward to his freshman season or his sophomore season, and that we can't in December or in October when we're at City Park run into Corey when he's home for break, checking on his teammates and just kind of being a part of this community as a leader and a role model for that next wave of young kids that are hoping to follow in his same footsteps. That's what pains me on the inside. When we saw that news Sunday, I hesitated to text you because you were on a staycation. You're just trying to get away from it all, and I can understand that. So I know that it's just hard to digest at this point. If you see someone, you just let them know that you love them, and I'm running out of things to say. It's just wasn't expecting to see that news on Sunday, like a lot of the other instances we've seen over the past couple of months. But again, don't let another Corey Adams happen again. This is, it's sad enough when adults lose their lives, and then you're talking about kids like this with their whole lives ahead of them. When you were 17 years old, there's so much good in front of you, so much growing and experiences, and for that to be taken away from Corey, there's nothing you can say that'll change my mind. And not to just keep repeating myself, but our thoughts and our prayers out with his family, with all those that were affected by this, and of course the Carr Cougars community. And I know that Coach Bryce didn't take this lightly and is going to do his best to make sure that no more wrong turns are taken, and all these lessons are learned. They become lessons as opposed to warnings.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, for Bryce, you mentioned it's been his mission for years and years to, ultimately not let another Tonka happen. And everything that Tonka has continued to mean to his former high school program. And so I don't know. There are certainly lessons that can be taken for young people everywhere. And, hopefully for us although it's frustrating because it feels like we never do get the lesson as a society, and just kind of the way that we approach some things. But I mean, Bryce has sadly learned that lesson too many times. He doesn't need to learn it, but he's had to experience it. And so I don't know. It has to be an incredibly frustrating, moment for he and that coaching staff to lose a young man like that under their watch did things the right way and had received that opportunity to head off to the next level and get away and go earn a college degree in the coming years and all those things. And, to your point, to kind of circle it back and wrap it up, you mentioned winding down my staycation on Sunday, and we were actually packing to get out of the Airbnb, and I saw the news, and it kind of put me on my ass a little bit, and shook me up in a way where my Allison was asking what was going on, why was I so frustrated and out of it, and everything that was kind of cycling through me at the moment. And all I said was another kid died, and that's been an experience that we have had enough that that's all I had to say. It wasn't a shock moment for her. It was just a realization of another young person, another one of the brightest young stars of this next generation of Louisianans, a big part of why we do what we do, that it has become such a recurring piece of this life that the people close to us kind of know, sadly, that this is a thing that happens, and not a lot else needs to be said, because they've just seen us go through it enough. And we've seen all of these communities around the state, whether it be gun violence or mental health or motorcycle accident, car accident, boating accident, freak health thing, any number of reasons, we just continue to lose people way too soon, and it sucks every single time. But again, just one last time, heart goes out to Corey's folks and everyone that he touched. This is Louisiana versus Oils, Recruit That Boot. Thanks as always to folks for tuning in. We'll be back next week talking some more about this upcoming football season. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jet Roser. Y'all take care of yourselves. And as Sam said, tell folks you love them.